My presentation is called A Breath After Cancer, and I'm going to be sharing about an Indigenous wellness model for caregivers and survivors. This is me pictured here on the left, pregnant with our firstborn, but that's me at Crazy Head Springs and outside of Langley, Montana. And I just need to first acknowledge the land that I come from. A lot of the teachings that I'm going to share are given to me and have been distributed through community. And first and foremost, it's important to name and acknowledge those communities and the lands that we come from. And then, yeah, this picture was in Clay's deck, but this is us on our home site on the Pine Ridge Reservation. So I've developed culturally and spiritually as well with our Oglala Lakota relatives in Pine Ridge. So taking a moment again to acknowledge these nations and to name, for those who maybe forget or are unaware or it slips outside of our consciousness, that this country, the United States, is just 250 years old. And our nations have been on this land for tens of thousands of years, or like we say, time immemorial. So again, establishing titles and positions where we're upholding this shared collective intergenerational Indigenous knowledge as a degree, from these institutions, which are our communities and our tribes and our nations that have pre-existed even the state of Montana. Taking a moment also to acknowledge the lands that are helping to raise our boys. Even though I grew up in Langley, Montana and spent time living in Pine Ridge, South Dakota, we're raising our boys in different, more rainy lands over in Oregon. So here on this map, the lands that we live on are recognized as Chinook territory. This, of course, is representing Indigenous nations, pre-colonization or contact. And of course, you can see we're here in the Plains area, which is the more orange, and you can see there the Cheyenne Nation listed. So when we go back to these pre-colonial times and we think about our people's health and lifestyle, our lifeways, when we think of our ceremonial practices and our celebrations, what we see is bodies moving. We see energies moving from head to toe. Energy is moving. Even as I do this, I can feel tingles kind of going down my arm. I can sense still some of those tears from seeing Clay's father on screen and knowing today is the day he died. And I think that's right. The ancestral spirit is here with us, is what I believe, is that he's here. This is the first time Clay and I have officially shared a stage talking about this work and how beautiful it is to land on this day as we remember him. But going back to our people, we were healthy. We had healthy systems. Our food was clean. Our water was clean. Our lifeway supported long lives. We hear stories of Cheyenne people living to be 100 years old, 110 years old. And then now we look at our lifespans and they are significantly shortened. But our people knew how to live and how to live well. Taking a moment to acknowledge the homelands that I've come from, ancestrally covered what is now known as Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado. And in this image, it's that kind of kidney bean shape of our homelands. And then now looking just at the tiny little highlight of what is left, that's our entire world, right? Our entire Northern Cheyenne Reservation. That's the home I grew up on. Those, 400,000 acres were my world. And when you look at the disparity of the land that we had access to, the animals, the plants, the water that we had access to, and then you think of this confinement that creates current states in our body, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But I want to pause and acknowledge my grandfather on my maternal side. My mother is Gladys Tauble. Her father is Jacob Tauble. His father was Albert Tauble. And this is the first Jacob Tauble pictured here. And his dad was chief of the Dog Soldiers. So Cheyennes had 7 military warrior societies. Politically, that was our government's structure. And Dog Soldiers were known as some of the fiercest warriors that were on these plains. And our people fought to defend our homelands and our lifeways and that health and life that each of us had. And Dog Soldiers were known for tying a stake around their ankle, and they were the first to run into battle, and they put that stake into the ground, and they would fight to the death where they could pick up the stake and walk away, or they gave their life. That's like the ferocity that is in my lineage, that's in my blood, that's what I've inherited. And so when I do talks like this, when I'm in my world, what I say is I'm battling historical trauma, that intergenerational trauma that lives in our bodies. But I tap into this type of ferocity and leadership to do this healing work. And of course I get nervous before every talk, and I just try to sit and breathe and pull that strength down into my own body. And so as such, I consider myself a modern day word warrior. So we'll talk a little bit more about words and how I use them. But as Clay mentioned, after they stole our land, they stole our children. So Carlisle Industrial School opened in 1879. By 1925, there were 61,000 Native children in these schools. Can't quite see with this menu, but by the next year, 1926, 8 out of every 10 Native children were stolen from their families and their communities and put through these assimilation boarding schools. So Clay mentioned his father being a part of that school. My mother was a part of that school, and my grandmother was a part of an assimilation boarding school as well. And 8 out of every 10. So if you're in this room, if you're Native, whether you know it or not, we had ancestors that are deeply impacted by this residential boarding school, the harm that was done here, physical, spiritual, mental, sexual, we can go on. But we talk about the nervous system states and what we have inherited. So Cheyenne people lived free. And then after we killed Custer, we were forced to Oklahoma by military escort by gunpoint, essentially, to what is known as Indian Territory, but now it's called Oklahoma. But after 13 months there, our people were dying. Half of our people died in 13 months after being forced there. There was no good food rations. There was disease. The temperature was terrible, humid. It was not what we were used to. Our people were eating our horses that were dying to survive. And so after 13 months there, the chiefs decided we're leaving. 4 of our chiefs led us home, and they split into 2 groups, and one group made it home. The other group was going to seek refuge at Red Cloud Agency, which is now Pine Ridge. So I'm thinking about our bodies running from soldiers that are chasing us and shooting as we leave Oklahoma. So they're either fighting back or running. So in the nervous system, you have a fight response and a flight response, right? So those are going off in our people. That group that was heading to Pine Ridge was intersected by cavalry and held up for Robinson, Nebraska. And they were systematically removed food, water, and firewood in the middle of the winter. Essentially, our people said, you're start caging us and starving us like dogs. So they broke out. And from that one incident on January 9th, 1879, the Fort Robinson outbreak, our homelands were recognized by executive order. So a lot of other tribes are treaty tribes where they sat down and recognized land boundaries. The Cheyenne people did not respect the invaders at all. And it took executive order for our land to be protected in the north. But what happens when we have the fight energy, the flight energy, and then we're confined to reservation boundaries? And it's literally made illegal for us to step across the line to get food. That fight and flight energy becomes internalized with the confinement. So what does that mean? That means we fight each other now. And Cheyennes are fighting each other a lot right now. Or we fight ourselves, we self-harm, right? Or we're trying to run away from ourselves and we turn to substances to try to disconnect. So that's where my healing work is centered on like what we've inherited, what conditions have created the health outcomes that we're facing today, and further, what can we create to make change for the future? So this, someone want to name what this beautiful image is? Medicine wheel. Medicine wheel, yes. I feel like, there's that saying, sweetgrass isn't a decoration. Don't just let your braid sit on your dashboard. The medicine that sweetgrass gives us, you burn it and you smudge, you breathe it in. Sweetgrass's medicine is breath, and that breath is life. And same with this medicine wheel. This is too often a design we paint, we bead, we put on jackets. But I want us really deeply to understand and remember that this is the wellness model that our ancestors left us. And in that wellness model, we have to honor mind, body, heart, and spirit. And only those 4, when they're balanced, we're fully well, we're fully healthy. And so we see different, well, I'll just pause there. Offering content for your mind, just that was acknowledging like who I am and where I come from, and now what I'm here to offer you is this, talking about walking with my grandma, from diagnosis to death, from IHS to OHSU. And then I'll talk a little bit briefly about catching my breath. So my personal process of grief and loss after her death, a spiritual moment that I had that I received grandma's blessing, how I carried forward all my teachings and learnings about health and healing to create Oniawi Chozani, which is a historical trauma healing model. And then now, how Clay said, our work has overlapped and I'm creating cancer survivor and community work. So to close today's experience, I'll offer an embodied breath-focused reflection for you to enjoy. So going back here, this can represent so many things. When I see this image, I just don't see a circle with 4 colors and 4 quadrants. I see so much of our philosophies embedded in this. So it can represent north, south, east, west, fall, winter, summer, spring. We believe as Cheyennes that we enter this life, we come from the spirit world, and we enter this life through the center of this medicine wheel. And we travel up, and that's maybe us creating a physical body in our mother's womb. And we enter life here at the top, and we come around this way. So we enter our first stage of life, which is infancy, then adolescence, adulthood, and our elder years. And our body is going to give way, and we're going to go back to the spirit world, exiting through that center. And our body is going to go back to the earth. All of our bodies have come from the earth, and all of our bodies will return. So again, we're here to learn. We are here to know, but we want to apply these knowings through relationship. And then at the close of our life, that's where we approach this wisdom. So in our communities, we see children and elders as the most sacred beings because they're the closest to the spirit world. So we hear children speak sentences of wisdom. And, you know, I've been shook by some of the things my sons have said, because you hear a creator talking through the children. And it's the same with our elders. They have all that wisdom and they have all that knowledge to share. So that is counter to the society we live in, where young people, young adults are given all the attention, and we kind of forget to take care of our babies and our old people. But again, yeah, round and around this medicine wheel. So my talk is going to go around this medicine wheel. The breath offering I'm going to close with is going to take us around that medicine wheel. And what I have found is the more and more you go connect with mind, body, heart, and spirit, the more healing that happens. So round and round we go. Taking a moment of pause here to realize that emotions, even though we're taught to name them in our mind, like happy or sad or nervous, they're not just concepts in our mind, they're states in our body, right? So dropping in below the neck and just sensing for yourself. Maybe there's a word on this slide that you could use to describe the physical sensation your body's having right now. So I won't ask for any out loud, but maybe just for yourself, you can sense. Right now I feel active, mouth is a little dry. But this ability to hear your body and to know what state you're in is called interoception. So your body's constantly talking to you at all times. And so this is a body sensation map where a study was done where 200 individuals were prompted to feel different emotions and then to name where on their physical body they felt that sensation, whether it was warmth or cold, activated or deactivated. And so what this shows is that every emotion that we can name with our mind has an associated physical state in our body. And so what I try to do through this body-based healing movement that I offer is reconnect people with their body, so that they can not only identify emotions, but feel that energy in their body. And the important part is to ramp that energy up and create space, soft, safe spaces for that energy to release. So that can look like shaking, crying, gagging, resting, whatever it is the body needs to do to move that energy out. That's how we're going to heal trauma in the body. And so that's a lot of information I give you for your minds. And now the quadrant we're going to swing into is the body quadrant. So I am asking you to allow me, that was going to sound weird. I was going to say access to your body, but let's not say that. Let's just say, be curious about your body as I continue through the next few slides. Because what we know is that historical trauma hides alarms in the nervous system. So your body is carrying things that you've inherited. And so through my healing movement, what we're there to explore and to learn is whether the alarms that our bodies carry, if they're mild, moderate, or intense. So does anybody's body have a reaction to this image? Maybe just raise your hand if you're noticing anything. I don't know, because I am not a product of white culture, but what I see on TV is that I learned white people are afraid of black cats, or that black cats have bad luck, or that it may be particularly bad if a black cat crosses your path. So I would anticipate maybe some bodies who grew up in that conditioning might have a response here, whereas for my native folks in the room, prepare yourself for the next image. Oh, that's good. The eyes are blocked. But again, so across a lot of Native communities, the owl is known as a messenger, but sometimes when we see owls, death will happen, and it's a message that death is coming. And so much so culturally, right, that the writers and producers of Reservation Dogs had a scene of an owl and literally blurred out the eyes to protect our cultural belief. But how your body would respond to seeing an owl or a black cat, again, is something you might have inherited or been conditioned to respond in that way. So Clay spoke about this briefly earlier, but those 8 out of 10 children of our ancestors who were put into these schools, their bodies had to go through somatic overrides. So when I look at this picture, you know, especially these 2 young girls in the front, how they're like taught to lace their fingers and sit absolutely still. They were just stolen from their family and their homelands. Like the amount of runaway energy that I imagine that they have to override for survival because they're going to be beat or hit or hurt or worse. What that causes is a disconnect when the brain is like run away for safety and you're in a condition that you cannot run away. There's disconnection happening between your own brain and your own body. And so this has happened to 8 out of 10 of our ancestors. And furthermore, we're in institutions that are created that still echo that same exact imagery. So when we think about Native students being in higher ed, right, it's how do their bodies feel comfortable? What have they even subconsciously picked up about a person, maybe specifically a white person, standing in front of or above them? How is their child body, our inherited nervous system state, responding to that authority figure? These are things that I think about and want to empower Native bodies to be able to recognize and to overcome within themselves. So I would say even me, being this, I see me here at the top, it feels uncomfortable to me. If it were my way, I'd have us sitting all in a circle. So again, alarms in the body can be inherited or conditioned. But when we think systemically, right, these systems that are now built on our land, whose alarms are prioritized and protected when we're in those systems? We largely know it's not Indigenous bodies. So this is where I'm going to offer some somatic exercises, and you can just be curious in your body about a response. So this is, again, the word warrior. What words we choose to say and how we choose to deliver them makes a difference in the body. So with this, I'm just going to repeat the word no a few times. And you, for yourself, just notice like what you feel in your body as this little exercise takes place. No. 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 So I'll pause there because I can feel my heart rate increase. So I feel like a little bit of shakiness. Just be curious about your own body. And now we switch to the opposite word. And I'll again invite you to just notice in your body if you noticed any movement or energy as I repeat this word. Yes. 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 So I sense just a little bit more air and a little bit more softness in me. Okay, can I ask our volunteer to read this sentence?
I live in Montana.
And after you say that sentence, can you name maybe what you're sensing in your body?
I don't really, I live here now, it's not. Okay.
Yeah, a vague feeling. Can I have you read the next one as well? I think there's 3.
I live on Indian, felt more fake.
I felt more vague.
Fake.
Fake.
I don't say that, but I don't. I felt kind of bad saying that.
Oh, you don't believe you live on Indian land?
Well, I mean, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one. One more sentence.
I live on stolen. Felt bad.
Yeah. Yeah, so when we talk about alarms, I would say non-native alarms our non-native bodies are gonna prefer this sentence, I live in Montana. It's a name that they have put on this land, and that makes their body feel fine, I live in Montana. And then Indigenous bodies, we know this is Indian land, there's a country living on our land, it's still Indian land. So when we say I live on Indian land, it's the same land, but the words make a difference and it impacts the body. And then of course, when we come to the truth of it, like Clay talked about the land grant and universities and how land was stolen and to create institutions that we live and work in. And so for Indigenous bodies and non-native bodies, we're gonna have competing alarms. It'll feel better in my body to hear people say, I live on stolen land. That feels good to me to hear the truth acknowledged. Whereas other bodies are gonna have alarms around that fact. These are 2 sentences, I mean, more of the same, but simply saying my family lives in comfort. If that statement is true for you, you might not have an alarm that might feel like airy and true, but saying the sentence, my family lives in poverty. If that sentence is true for you, you might feel some heaviness in your heart, in your stomach area. But this is where word warrior and healing come into play, the words we choose. So now I'm going to swing us from the body quadrant into the heart quadrant to talk more about what gets into my grandma's story. But in the heart quadrant of the medicine wheel, it's about relationship. So being curious about how you relate to yourself, your family, your ancestors, people of other races, people of other countries. How do you relate to animals, nature, the cosmos, and beyond? So I'm going to take a pause here to just invite you all to think of a loved one. Because for a lot of people in cancer work, their why, the reason they're drawn to that is because they have a personal story that has impacted them in their life. And so I would just ask you to think of a loved one that you know who may have been affected by cancer. Maybe their life was taken, maybe they have survived, but we're just going to think of that one person. We're going to breathe and remember them. And then I'll invite any volunteers who might be willing to share. So saying only the relation, since we're in the heart quadrant, relation and name. So like Grandma Cecilia. Does anyone else have a relation with someone who is affected by cancer that they'd like to speak their name and relation out loud?
Father Chuck.
Father Chuck. Maybe one more?
Uncle Randy Medina.
Uncle Randy, thank you for naming them. This is my grandma Cecilia. This picture was taken at Sundance in South Dakota, and as a Cheyenne women don't Sundance. Lakota women do Sundance. So when I was living in Pine Ridge and was feeling my spirit called to Sundance, I talked to my grandma and she said, no, that's very powerful. Don't mess around with that. We don't do that. But I had to listen to my own spiritual calling, which was absolutely pulling me into that place. And I completed my vow, and on the 5th year of dancing, my family I got close to over there, my Hunka family, gave me a Lakota name, and so it was a big year for me to do my giveaway ceremony and to get my name. And it took 4 or 5 years for my grandma to override or to overcome her alarms in her body about me sundancing. But she came, she did the 4.5, 5 hours to show up to support, and of course we honored elders, and that was her getting a gift. But this day was super important to me to be able to hold her hand and to have her present in that moment. She was at the Indian Health Service Clinic, and she kept complaining, my food is backing up. my food is backing up. So she's like, right there, Langer service unit, not even a quarter mile from her house. She kept going into the doctor and saying my food is backing up, and they misdiagnosed her with acid reflux and kept sending her home with antacid pills. Meanwhile, she's losing 10 pounds a month for like 6 months consecutively. She's just withering away. So the Langer clinic sent her to the Crow Hospital to do an ultrasound. Of course, the Indian IHS has limited resources, but I think through purchase and referred care, they sent her to Billings for imaging, and that's when they discovered the tumor. And so right away we learned that it was cancer, and that's where we figured out like what are the things, I guess that's here, grandma's mind, like what does she need to know? I then took on the role of her caregiver, our supporter, and so these are things like, how can I support my grandma through her cancer journey? What does she need to know? So understanding who her providers were, primary care, oncology, pharmacist. There's so much with the insurance. She had Humana, Montana Medicaid, and Medicare. In order to be her medical decision maker, I had to go through getting a medical power of attorney so I could call the clinics and make these decisions on her behalf. And then also all the appointments, dates, times, locations, copay amount, making sure she had the amount at the appointment. So there's a lot that those who are supporting a cancer patient hold with them or for them. So this is a picture of my grandma outside her cabin in Lander with the grandkids. And there's not a large cancer center in the state of Montana. So what I did was drove from Portland all the way to Lander, picked up my grandma, and we decided we were going to take her to OHSU. Because she had Medicare, she was able to get services there. But this was her in Billings getting her CT scan that confirmed there was a tumor. From there, oh, this is us in Missoula. We stopped here because it was the halfway point. But yeah, taking her on this journey, 15 hours, that was us hitting the gorge. And my grandma was so cute with her little phone, and she wanted to take pictures of the changing landscape. And also she hated me taking her picture. So I would just like sneak it anytime that I could. But then here we arrived to Beaverton. This is the Night Cancer Institute for her to get the higher level of imaging, which is a PET scan, which I don't think there's that type of equipment here. So my grandma came from Linder. There's not two-story buildings or even an elevator. And then she's, you know, navigating this huge system in the city of Portland. Luckily, I was there to help her. And then this was after the PET scan. This was us waiting for the meeting with oncologist. And in that meeting, we learned that she had stage 4 metastatic stomach cancer, and we're simply told to just take her home and keep her comfortable for as long as we could. At that point, there was no treatment that was viable for her. So when we returned home, the next thing, grandma's body, what does she want to do, right? So I started saying, Grandma, what's your bucket list? Like, where do you want to go? What activities do you want to do? Are there any new experiences you want to have? But I had an Uncle Tim who used to be a truck driver, and he told my grandma, I'm going to take you to the ocean. He promised her, I'm going to take you to the ocean. Unfortunately, he passed away before he did take her to the ocean. But from where we are in Portland, the ocean is like 2 hours away. So I just told myself it's a trip to Billings. Let's just take her on that cruise and let her get to go see the ocean. And she was too frail to walk to the ocean. So I had a little cup, a little plastic cup, and I ran all the way to the water, scooped her up some and brought it back just for her to be able to touch. And then when we got back to her little cabin, she was so dead set on, she had lost weight and she always wore jeans, and she wanted to make a denim tarp. So I've never heard of a denim tarp. It sounds heavy. I don't know what she wanted to do with it, but she was so set on doing it. And so I supported her. I didn't need to understand what the use of a denim tarp is, but it was something important to her. And so as a caregiver, again, it's kind of removing yourself, but supporting their journey, because the trauma, the incident, the disease is happening to them. So I just took these moments of pause to really like capture the images and try to get the memories that I knew I would want to hold on to. And after a while, she stopped sewing, and I finished that denim tarp for her. But it was just, again, something that was important to her and that she wanted, and so we made it happen. There's also, it was important to her to continue like upkeep with her haircuts, you know, some simple things, but those were like the little amount of energy she had on that cancer journey. She would rally to go to be able to, you know, get her haircut. And then the one trip she would take is to Deadwood, South Dakota to go gamble. So I took her on, one last trip to Deadwood, gave her $50, she didn't win. But it was, one of the things again that like brought life and vitality to her during this time. And you also saw this slide in this picture in Clay's slide deck, but our sacred sites again. So Crazy Head Springs, where that water is, we are very fortunate to have a piece of our land that just offers this life and this water to us. It's one of our most sacred sites. So one time, she was so tired, she spent a lot of time in bed, but I would, one day I just said, Grandma, let's go to Crazy Heads. And she said, for what? I said, just to go. We took the kids, we watched them play, and we got her some water. But as Cheyenne people, like our creation stories, our spiritual connections, again, are tied to these places. And that was her last visit to Crazy Head. And then her heart, right? Relationship. Who did Grandma want to spend time with? And this is how we spent so much time. And I'm a bead worker, so it was no problem for me. I just sat on her bed and beaded. She was very into Asian sitcoms, and we watched a lot of TV. But this was what it was. It was just about being with her. There wasn't a lot I had to do in these moments, just to be with her. When she was in Portland, waiting for her imaging, I went up to my room where she was, and she was crying. And I was like, what's the matter? And she said, I'm just so alone. I'm in my cabin. When I go back home, I'm lonely. And so when they said take her home and make her comfortable, I could not let her return back home to feel so alone. So essentially I moved back to the res for 7 months out of that year. And in that time, I also helped to sustain the relationships. Like this is my dad pictured here, that's his mom. But due to the things she went through as a child and then how she parented, right? He had some unresolved grief in his body, and he was resistant to going visiting his mom at this late stage in her life because of the things that he didn't feel were healed yet, right? So it was me helping to soothe those relationships and make these connections happen, because this time was limited and those connections are important. And then of course, basketball is life. So one thing she made sure she wanted to do was to go watch my nephew play in the district basketball tournament. So we made sure to go watch some basketball. And then she had her birthday, and she was totally surrounded by family and grandkids. That was her last birthday she shared with us. And this is a still shot from a video, but right after that, she said, I need some help. And you best believe all those kids around the table blew those candles out for my grandma. And then for her spirit, how can we support Grandma's spirit to make her transition from being a relative to being an ancestor? And so organizing, gifting, and preparing for her journey, establishing legal documents, vehicle titles, and wills. Our people don't like to prepare this way. And my grandma did. And my mom's mom, she passed away, like she went into the hospital from COVID. It was pre-vaccine, and she just went in and never came out. We buried her when she came out, and there was nothing like established. And so I saw what my family had to go through to navigate 8 kids with that mess. And then this grandma was very intentional and had everything established. And that was such a gift to us, so that when she passed, there was no questions, and we could just carry forward with processing our emotion around her loss. Also self-representation. One day I was sitting there on her bed, and she just said, grab your computer, let's write my obituary. On her own, to have the courage to say, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to leave it exactly how I want it. And days later, she'd say, get your computer now. I want to add my one friend from, way back when. And so it was a beautiful process to watch her get to shape that, and for her to leave that behind, even choosing the image we were going to use. And then, of course, considering what cultural practices, prayer and ceremonies and protocol are necessary for her and her descendants. So when we think of cancer patients and even this journey towards the end of life, for natives, our ancestors left us this medicine wheel roadmap of how to care for the full person on their journey. So this was her totally unboxing, going through old pictures, naming people on pictures, writing names on the back, only things that she knew. And then those moccasins I was reading earlier, Cheyennes believed that we should have journey moccasins when we're laid to rest, that we have moccasins on our feet. But it was important for me to make sure my grandma had them and that she could wear them while she was still here. So they're not just, moccasins that are on not moving feet. And then, of course, I had to include this little picture of her taking her selfie of her toes in her new mocks. But as you know, as it happened, we have an older son we share custody with, and so I would drive back to Portland the weekends we had him. I'd drive back to Lander for all other days, come back to Portland, so that again, honoring the child, that for his life it was stability and consistency. He didn't know I had essentially moved home. And I told myself in that back and forth that if she took her last breath when I was gone, that would be her gift to me. Or if she chose to take her last breath when I was present, that also would be her gift to me. And it ended up happening that I was away, even though I was there for the daily, and the cousins and the aunties and uncles like couldn't come near it, didn't want to, watch her deteriorate. When I was gone with our son, they all came and they all surrounded her, and they were there for that moment of her last breath. That's not quite here, but it was just a few days later, and tying the Sundance thing back into place. I was Sundancing that year in June, and she said, I want to go. That was one of the last things she said, I want to go watch you Sundance. And so they got a whole RV thing and packed her up and went to camp, and we did our best to make that happen. And that was end of the last week in June, and she passed away on July 8th. So just shortly thereafter. So that, again, another full circle moment, her spirit choosing what she wanted to aim for and hold on to, and then making it there. And this, of course, was her beautiful obituary that we got to put together. And then again, who are the prayer people? Who's going to paint her? Who's going to come bless the family? Making all those arrangements so that there was no question when it happened. And Cheyenne's do a hair cutting ceremony to tell everyone when we're in mourning. And that responsibility fell on me to have every person in our family in front of us one by one, and having me cut their hair to honor my grandma in that way. And the reason we do all these practices, right, it's for the future. There was children who are not able to do these practices, and it's our responsibility to help pass that ancestral knowledge and those life ways down. So just saying we love you, Grandma. Yeah, one thing I say too, she's like, don't put me on Facebook. And to this day, I have never put her on Facebook. But I think she would be okay with us sharing this story now, because the learnings that have come from it will help to help people's journey as we move forward. And after she passed away and I went home for the funeral and stuff, we were coming back. And I stayed here in Missoula. There was like a night I was in this waking state, and then my grandma came to me like above my bed, and it was like in like this kind of blue light where I just felt this, there were like balls of light shooting from her to me. It was like something she was like passing to me that I could sense and feel, and I knew with everything in me. And then soon those balls of light started being reciprocal, coming back from me to her. And in that transference, I felt the boarding school kids. And I knew that we're all connected, and our spiritual healing that we do today helps heal beyond. When I returned to Portland from that loss, I had severe stress and anxiety from the fallout of the 7 months on the res, and then just processing that loss, crying. It's healthy to cry. This is my mentor, Tommy Lee Boone. He's the somatic master trauma therapist, and he gave me as many one-on-one sessions as I needed to let the body discharge that emotion to reach, again, peace and stability and healing. So we went back to the body. Again, how do we name what's happening? How do we let that energy amplify in the body to create a release so that we can access peace and health? And so from him, I learned a ton about the nervous system. We want to be in this green space, which is the ventral vagal social engagement space. But again, what can happen is either, an event can happen where our body goes into the fight or flight. And when that becomes too intense, we can also go into a freeze response. And so I've talked about collectively how Cheyennes have this fight and flight confinement, and then sometimes freeze. So what I'm trying to do is get our bodies back down into accessing social engagement. And so from that, from my personal healing journey, Oniawi Chozani was born, and that's an Indigenous centric metasomatic meditation-based historical trauma healing modality that I designed. Indigenous centric just meaning by and for natives, integrates ancestral wellness philosophies. Soma is the Greek word for body, so we're just meta-somatic, being aware of the body. Meditation-based, it's guided breath work, which through that I teach nervous system regulation techniques to treat this racialized trauma and the experiences that are in our body. So trauma at its core is disconnection, right? There's a huge disconnection from our belief systems, from our community, from our homelands, our practices, our plants. We're disconnected from our own body and from our whole self. So what I do with Oneawa Chozani is create reconnections, reconnecting to water, land, fire, and air, wanting to liberate the mind, decolonize the body from these colonized alarms, so we can open our heart and really open that spiritual channel to unleash us, to guide us in the ways that are best for the people moving forward. So I've written 12 recordings. They're distributed in small groups throughout the year. Some are for personal capacity building, some are for interpersonal relationship building, and then with the last 3, we focus on systemic change. This is like my calendar for the year, where it's completely voluntary. I lead circles every other Tuesday throughout the year, and then we honor the moon cycles by doing crafting parties, study halls, group listens of ceremony, and then on the full moon, I give one person very direct guided attention for somatic release. And when I was writing ceremonies, they were just kind of like, I was being shown them, they're coming out of me. And then one day I had to just stop and draw, like, what is the ceremony? Like, what is it? I call it ceremony because it's a mini ceremony. I don't call them meditations. But when I drew it out, everyone has an introduction and an opening. So like Cheyenne's Blue, we're entering this life here. Then we do some settling of the body before there's the flute or whistle sound. And then round 1, 2, 3, and 4 for mind, body, heart, and spirit. And then the ceremony does a somatic inquiry. So we're checking on the body from beginning. Is there any change to now at the end after we've journeyed that medicine wheel? And then it has closing words of inspiration before there's another, whistle, and then gratitude and belonging. We always close by saying, this breathing and being will help to heal us. So in the spiritual quadrant, I believe we co-create the future. Us here, we co-create the future. We are all now in this adult part of our life, maybe entering the elder years. So we want to apply all the teachings that we have and turn that into wisdom. And so I just invite you to be curious about what your body inherited. It could be those alarms, but it can also be brilliance, right? This drive, ferocity for healing. But bottom line, we are the change makers today. And I think we should all be the ancestors that our descendants deserve. So this model is designed to be tailored and scaled. And so I've worked with Mayo Clinic, delivering an abbreviated version of this to their Native American Pathways program. So that's their pre-medical med student bridge program. The University of Wyoming's Native Student Center has invited me in to offer direct student support. This was closer to COVID time when people were dying a lot, and there was a lot of emotional rupture happening in the student community. We were able to present for the Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders Council. Soon I'll be presenting at Strengthening the Circle for Hope Mountain, and then I'm just beginning conversations with the Northwest Native Chamber for their staff to go through this experience for professional development. But where it becomes exciting is where my life and my husband's life, not our lives, our professions are now. I was so thankful our lives paths crossed, but now this weird, beautiful, crazy professional overlap is happening. As he mentioned, they were going into the community, having these discussions about cancer, and the community said, we need more mental and emotional health support to have these conversations, because you're coming in, having them, and then you're leaving, and that leaves us unsettled. So now I've been invited to join his research team as they go to the reservation, and we close the sessions now with some of this guided breath work. So it helps the bodies to be more at peace and hopefully more willing to come back and to have the next conversation. And so we have many dreams of how this model can be adapted and expanded and distributed, but one of the next things on our radar is creating Native cancer support groups. So we're going to pilot in Portland's urban Native community kind of ceremony-based model where we're bringing people together who have survived cancer to help heal, because even if the cancer is gone, right, their heart has gone through a lot and their spirit has gone through a lot. And so how can we provide full healing to the other parts of themselves that once the medicine doctors are like, you're done, there's still more healing that needs to happen. So after we collect data and see how design that program, our goal again is to distribute that to the reservations in Oregon and beyond. But we want to create a model that is self-sustaining so that, like, I create it, I go teach it, the members learn it, and then they run it so that I can then step away and keep creating anything. So this is where I invite you to experience just a small, brief version of what I offer. So I'm going to guide us if you feel ready and willing. I'm going to invite you to get comfortable. I think I'll do about 5 minutes and then leave 5 minutes for questions. But let me take another drink of water. So in this time, I'm going to invite you to think of a loved one. And because we're here talking about cancer, cancer care, and Indigenous cancer care, if there is someone in your life who is impacted by cancer, who maybe died from cancer, I invite you to just sit with the thought of them, the image of them, or their spirit. And then we're going to enter this a little bit more officially, like I do with my ceremonies. So I'm going to take off my glasses and shift my attention. I'm going to lower my gaze so that I'm more focused and less distracted. So if you feel comfortable closing your eyes at this point, I would invite you to do so. And if not, you too can just lower your gaze and maybe pick one point on the ground to focus on. And we begin with 4 deep breaths. And so with this first breath, I'm just going to invite you to take a deep breath with your own self. So on 3, breathe with yourself. 1, 2, 3. And with the second breath, I'm going to invite you to breathe with the person who you've brought to mind. 1, 2, 3. And with this third breath, I'm going to invite us to breathe and notice we're breathing together. So when we inhale, sense those in the room, those in the virtual Zoom space, maybe those watching this recording in the future, and know that each of those people you're thinking of is thinking of a loved one. So let's take a deep breath in community. 1, 2, 3. Taking a moment to notice if that last breath felt any different than the first breath, where you're just breathing alone. In Oneawi Chozani, we always take 4 deep breaths, and the last one is to honor breath and health. Onia, we Chozani. 1, 2, 3. And in round 1, we acknowledge our mind. So I'll allow you some time to just sit with your own mind. Notice what it's doing. Notice if your thoughts are fast or slow. In this healing movement, we acknowledge that the mind is like water. So it can be scattered like rain, flowing like a river. But we understand that the mind is as deep and as expansive as the ocean. Let's take one deep breath for you to be grateful and acknowledge your mind for all that it does for you. 1, 2, 3. And then again, using the mind to bring this person to the forefront. Noticing their face or what you remember about it. Imagine their smile or their laugh. Noticing what you feel in the body as you think of them. And with this breath to honor the body, we're going to breathe in. And as you do, imagine this person's love is filling up your chest. And when you exhale, send some love back to them wherever they are. 1, 2, 3. Entering the heart quadrant, being curious about your relationship with this person. Being curious about anything that you felt might have been left unsaid. I invite you to take this moment in your own mind and heart to say one sentence that you would hope this person could hear from you right now. Again, noticing any shifts in your body. And I invite you to place a hand on your heart to acknowledge the fire that lives inside. This is your passion and your power. Each of us has our own drumbeat alive inside our body. Let's take one breath together to acknowledge this heart of ours. When you breathe in, try to stoke the fire that's in your heart. When you breathe out, send collective energy to the others in this space, physically and virtually, to help stoke their fires as well. 1, 2, 3. Noticing the rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. Any other sensations that are happening. Feel free to keep holding your heart or to move your hand to a place that is comfortable. We're going to enter the spiritual quadrant. And this is where we gather the energy because we are co-creators. So in Cheyenne, we call creator Mahea. And we have a phrase, Mahea, I am a co-creator. Recognize how each breath is a sign that your spirit is alive and in your body. Take a moment to imagine the first breath you took in this body. Taking a moment to know and to sit with that someday there will be a last breath that will leave this body. And recognizing the importance of everything that is going to happen between now and that moment. This is where I invite you, if you feel comfortable, to connect with your ancestors and to pull in their power and energy. And if you notice in your body any resistance to connecting with ancestors, I invite you instead to connect with the earth. But our breath is our life and our breath is our power. So place one hand on your belly if you feel comfortable. And notice the rise and fall with this deep breath. 1, 2, 3. Being curious about what silence brings. This is where we receive messages. Let's just close with one final breath of gratitude for all that's been shared today. 1, 2, 3. And if you feel comfortable, you can open your eyes or relift your gaze. And that will conclude my offering. And that's all I have. We're here to co-create beautiful ways of life today for the generations yet to come. I used the whole 10 minutes, so I'll hang out with questions if anyone has them, but if you gotta go, go ahead. Thank you.